how have you defined charisma over the past decade, and what does that currently look for you at this phase of your life now?
Yeah. I understood it primarily as influence and leadership, and I think that's a huge portion of it. So if I think of charisma, it's what makes someone want to date me? What makes my boss want to give me a promotion? What makes the group of people that I'm talking to not talk over me when I'm telling a story? It's this subtle layer of influence. And the way that I conceived of it is that it's a series of habits, mindsets, beliefs that lead to people responding to you in a certain way. And I measured it both by how I felt internally, but tremendously by the responses that I got from other people. So if I got the date, got the promotion, and if people really wanted to listen to my story and invited me back, that was a sign that I was charismatic. So happy to lean into that. It has shifted, and you've alluded to this. I really saw it as something that anyone could develop, and I still believe that to be true. But I did not think that it was an innate quality of each person. And that is shifting for me. Increasingly, I find that it is something that is remembered rather than developed and added to. But I think both of them have to go together in order to go through the full arc of what it is to grow up and mature in life.
Going through that arc, we will in this conversation, I'm sure. I'm curious, why do you think charisma is an important thing to talk about and to learn about?
It was the most important thing for me. When I became a philosophy major, but fundamentally, I was someone who asked a lot of questions. Like, why do we have to do this? Why this? Why are we learning about this history thing in school that I don't care about? And so when I was noticing the things that I and other people seem to want in their life, it was connection almost every time. It was, I want this group of people to accept me. I want to do better in work and I want to move up. I want to get the date, the husband, the wife, the opportunities. And the way that they approached it always seemed roundabout. Like they would go get really good grades for 12 years and then go to a really good college and then try to make a lot of money. And then when they were 35, they'd be like, now I'm ready to find my wife. And I was 21 and I was going, why wait till 35? Why do all that stuff that is secondary and not important? And that was the key insight that made me dedicate myself to it. Not because I thought it was a good business opportunity. It definitely wasn't. There wasn't anyone talking about charisma at the time. But I think it turned out to be a good business opportunity because it really touches on the essence of what we all deeply care about and what makes us actually feel good. It's not, oh my gosh, I have so much money in my bank account. It's the thing that we think that is going to offer to us in our social relationships.
What do you see as the prevalent why and the reason as to when people like stumble upon your work? What are they looking for? Why would they study charisma? What is it providing for them?
Yeah. Well, I think the surface level question might be like, what do I text this girl whose number I got and I'm really nervous and I don't know what to say? Or it might be, I just got this new job. I feel out of my depth and I'm a leader. How do I not screw this up? What I think people are really looking for is a sense of belonging and a sense of certainty that they can belong, right? So what we provide, I try to give those initial answers to the questions. Okay, here's a really good thing to text for a first date. Okay, here's what you can do in that first initial meeting to establish that you're a leader that can be trusted in a very concrete way. But what they fundamentally want is that deeper sense of certainty that they belong.
It seems like the more like I've grown on my own path, I've seen how both things are a necessity. On one hand, we need to build up the habits and skills that we just haven't had in our adolescence or growing up or through schooling or education that we haven't had. So as it pertains to charisma, the things to like start becoming more of a natural way of being that feel almost inauthentic, maybe at first practicing when connecting with people. And then the second side of it is like part of growing is removing what's in the way of who we naturally are and what's in the way of presence.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure we'll teeter-totter both between both throughout this conversation because it's important to both accept the parts of us that fear and are barriers to connection and remove what stands in the way from what we really want, what you alluded to as being true connection, intimacy. We want to be a part and we want to be accepted. We want to be a part of the groups and fundamentally we want to be loved and, and be liked.
Yeah.
Now, there are so many different coping mechanisms and behavioral adaptations that we can have to be liked. Like we will change ourselves in so many ways to be a part of an in-group, to be liked fundamentally. How do you see, as you supported with people and studied this over the years, the difference between like the skills and tactics and techniques that you learn, which maybe feel inauthentic at first, to actually like arriving at a place where you're comfortable in your own skin and it becomes more natural and effortless.
Yeah. The larger arc, there's so many ways to put it, but you have to develop an ego before you can transcend the ego. So there needs to be a sense of mastery and control and safety, both in your life and in social environments, before you can, as you said, release and let go. I think a lot of the initial step that people get in the way is they think that every single habit that they've developed, they identify with. This is me. So I am the awkward way that I shake hands. I am the uncomfortable way that I twiddle my thumbs at the bar. And any sort of attempt to adjust or amend that is me changing myself. And I will not do that because that's inauthentic. I would suggest that that's not true. That actually there are many ways that are not essential to the core of who you are. So for instance, this often started for guys that were trying to get girls to like them. We would go out to public places and bars. And one thing I would see a lot of guys do is when they were talking in loud environments, they would lean in. Now, some of these guys are 6'5" and they're talking to someone who's 5'5". And now you have this situation where he's like hovering over her. And no matter what he says, she can't feel comfortable in that space. So I would tell people, make the simple adjustment of like lean back, lean against the bar. And if you can't hear her, just point to your ear and allow her to enter into your space. It was amazing to watch without almost any other input, the dramatic tenor change of the conversations that guys would have. And so that was a very core key example of the type of thing, which is, look, this is not who you are. This is a habit that you unthinkingly developed at some point in your life. A lot of the habits that we carry are from who we were in 8th grade, and we just take them through as if this is who we are. So it's in unwinding some of those habits. And that could be everything from eye contact, how you introduce yourself, what you say you do, if you trail off at the end of a sentence when you're telling a story, how you handle interruptions, all these sorts of things. And we can touch on any of the particular skills. But those are not essential to who you are. Then there is this thing that happens that I've seen after 10 years of doing this, where you get such a degree of mastery over a social situation that there's a you that's missing. Right? I know what to say to make this work. I know what to say to get this person to like me, but I'm not leaning into my vulnerability. I'm not leaning into the parts of me that I'm not sure will work. And that's when it becomes time. Okay, let's start to remove some of these skills. The habits will remain. We could still lean back. We still don't need to invade people's space. We have a felt sense of that, but there's a different arc that can develop at that point in someone's life. Mm-hmm.
I've heard you define charisma in a couple different contexts, both like, can you influence people? And then also, do you awaken the best in people? Mm-hmm. The latter isn't always like understood as part of charisma. And I'm curious your thoughts on how charisma, do you feel charisma is inherently like neutral? Like, because there are very charismatic leaders in the past that have done horrible things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Adolf Hitler was undeniably charismatic. I think Martin Luther King Jr. was undeniably charismatic. What is the difference? It is not the tool of persuasion that they used. It is what they directed it towards. And this comes, we'll get there, I'm sure, to like, what is running through your system at the time? Where are you leading people? But in both cases, you can learn from people that you despise. You can learn from Andrew Tate. I think this is a huge missing piece in so many of the people that are upset with Andrew Tate and his influence, is that they're missing the incredibly captivating way that he speaks. They're not learning from it, because the tools of communication and persuasion and all of these things are inherently neutral. But there's a value system that where you point it that has a dramatic impact.
So if you're interested in the fastest way that I know of to make this stuff effortless, you might be interested in my course, Charisma University. You get full details at the link here, but basically, if you like the YouTube channel and charisma, confidence, building respect is a priority for you, I highly encourage you to click the link, check it out, learn more, and maybe join. Either way, I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.